meets world. Boy meets world. When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bruh?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
When it's bruh meets world.
Your boy meets world fun cast. I am CJ.
And I am Tony Coitus. What is up, bruh?
It is Friday. It is rainy in LA, so it's one of those like smooth jazz evenings.
Bro, totally. Hey, what's your rainy day movie?
Oh, a rainy day movie. Honestly, I'm more of like a rainy day book person. That's me.
Ooh, okay.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like a nice, I'm not gonna lie, audiobook. I've made that pretty clear at this point in time, but like a nice audiobook, like just chill. You know, I spend a lot of time looking at the computer, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had quite a storm in LA the other night, and my puppy baby mama, my fiance, she was out late for whatever, some odd reason. And so I was just home alone with my blanket, and I started watching The Dark Knight. And I know it doesn't come to mind as a rainy day movie, but man, that movie just like was chicken noodle soup to my soul. That's just a perfect movie. Still. I know we're going to talk about other things. I just wanted to, that was just a nice little moment I had to myself in the rain yesterday with all the windows open. It was great.
That's good. You know, you gotta like it. So you ready to talk about this episode?
This episode, yes, I am. I actually have a lot of questions for you about this episode. Just because one, I feel like I've seen it already. And two, there was a moment like midway through the episode where I was like, what? And so I'm excited to get into my raw moment with you.
I think we both are aware of that. Okay, so let's just kind of start it off. I guess we go into the tell me about it.
Tell us about it. It's college recruitment day. Shawn worries that he's too poor for the college Cory has in store.
I like it. I love it when you put in effort. All right, so this is season 5, episode 3. It's not you, it's me. After Shawn and Cory agrees to attend the same college, Shawn learns Cory made interview plans on his own, and the two decide that it's time to go their separate ways. Meanwhile, Eric thinks befriending the dean will ease his and Jack's college experience.
I thought Jack's story was kind of pointless. If you want, we can just do them really fast, or we can save them for later. But I don't really have much to say about that bullshit.
Well, I think it like not necessarily nothing. We talked about like not really knowing who Jack is, and I think that they are giving us little hints, like he speaks Chinese. You know what I'm saying? So
he speaks Chinese. Oh my gosh. Okay. Should we jump into the roll call real fast?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can start off with, I have people, but is there someone you wanted to start off with?
Yeah, I guess the main person I want to talk about is Dean Burke. Am I saying that right?
Yep, I have it. Paul Gleason.
Paul Gleason, if you're like Generation Z, you probably don't know shit about Paul Gleason, but he was actually like such a staple for 80s movies. He was in Breakfast Club, he was in Trading Places, he was in Die Hard. He's just this face that I always remember seeing in a ton of movies from the 80s. And although he may not seem like a huge get, I have to imagine that the guy who was the actual principal from Breakfast Club being the hard-ass dean for Will Friedle must have been a cool experience.
Absolutely. It's in general, I think we've seen him in a few bit pieces, and I think he just plays authoritarian well. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I'm trying to look at the next person. But actually, we can save the rest of roll call.
I don't really think there's much left there.
Like one of the things I wrote down is that Eric, he has a learning disability, and I was like, you probably do. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, okay. Like, I'm so glad you brought that up because the thing that's really awesome about it is, interesting, is while they're struggling to write this paper, which we later learn has literally no rules whatsoever, Eric says to Jack in kind of a joking way, like, oh, my learning disability keeps me from progressing or something like that. And he says it in a way that's just kind of a joke. And Jack's like, do you really have a learning disability? And Eric's like, it would make sense, right? I don't remember the exact thing he says, but he says something to the effect of it would make sense for me too. And I just think that's really interesting because we never had anything about a learning disability brought up for Eric. And it would make a ton of sense for both him and Shawn to have maybe some learning disability of sorts. So it would be more interesting if they had dived into that a little bit, you know, not even to like make it a struggle that he has to overcome, but maybe just say like, hey, you know, Eric has his learning disability and that's fine, you know, and not giving too much attention to it, just giving it some merit, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people watching who have learning disabilities who would have probably felt a kinship to Eric had they flesh that out a little bit.
Absolutely. And, you know, we've mentioned this quite a few times in the past. He's intelligent, but just the way that he expresses his intelligence may not be valued as traditional smart, especially as he gets older. So the wise fool is what I think they call it.
I mean, I don't know how wise he is. Are we just finishing the Eric and Jack? Because I have some other things to add to that if we're just like on the Eric and Jack storyline.
Do the Eric and Jack storyline.
I guess the one thing I want to say is that this is the first episode where Jack meets Feeney, and we kind of have like those world collidings in a way. And even though Jack's character isn't super fleshed out, we do learn a little bit about his background. But I think probably the most significant thing about this episode is the fact that he and Feeney meet for the first time, and that Feeney and Eric establish a mentorship through Eric's college career. Even though Feeney's not teaching college yet, he is still kind of like going above and beyond for Eric in that mentorship role.
Yeah, no. I even liked the way that Feeney kind of ribbed him a little bit when we were talking about the going trip to China or whatever. He's like, you got pictures? Then you got nothing. You know, it's just that familiarity. And he seemed to automatically see that this kid needed help, or you know what I'm saying? It's like Feeney gave him the same attention that he would have if it was Shawn or someone else. Which
absolutely, yeah.
Always when it's television, that's what they're scripted to do, but it also is very telling of like how they feel the Feeney character treats Eric and his friends.
Did you ever have someone in college that you could go to and just be like, hey, I need an extension on the paper, and they were like good for it? Like, I feel like that's kind of an unrealistic like relationship with the dean. I don't know that a dean is the person who would administer extensions.
That's what I was gonna say. The only thing that I was questioning is like, why would you go to the dean and not your teacher? I mean, I think they just it's one of those things where Boy Meets World likes to have dual roles. So your teacher is your principal, is your guidance counselor, is like there's all of these roles that all are being the hats
they wear
by Feeney in high school, and it's like, no, there should be more than one teacher. So for me with Eric, he kind of learned something that I learned a long time ago, that if we want to go back to, which we haven't used in a while, white man logic, which is that you don't be good at this job. You don't need to do it. You need to actually work. All you need to do is make friends with the boss, get in. Once you have that signature, once you have their cosign, then it's just easy sailing. And I thought that was
because what Eric's logic is not like, hey, I'm going to form this relationship to get an extension on this paper. I'm going to form a relationship so that I never have to do work again. Because in Eric's world, he believes that forming a relationship with the right person will keep him from having to do work. It's a very interesting thing to unpack.
Why would a good-looking white man believe that all he needs to do is make friends in order to find success?
With another older white man. Like,
where would you get that idea?
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's hilarious. Did you have much more? Like, that was honestly the things that I wanted to say.
My last thing is Jack randomly speaks Chinese at the end of the episode, and it wouldn't be random if Jack went to China for his summer vacation, but we find out he did not go to China for his summer vacation. So it was just interesting because I think there's one or two episodes of Boy Meets World where Shawn will randomly speak French for whatever reason.
Yes,
like there's no reason for him to know French, but he will just speak French. And maybe this is like a Hunter thing where you can just pull out languages whenever you're in a bind to get you out of something. That feels like something that they inherited from Chet.
I was gonna say, if there's one person I believe is teaching his kids how to not necessarily con, but definitely get over in different languages, I believe that's something Chet would do.
Oh my goodness. But other than that, I don't really have much to say. I'm actually a little disappointed with the B storyline. There was no marriage at any point with the A storyline where it felt like, you know, the writers felt like there was some cohesiveness. It's yeah, I don't have anything.
It was fun to learn a little bit more, and it was fun to see Eric like kind of really show the anxieties that come. Like, I like the idea of the storyline of, hey, you're new to school, and maybe that is the threat. Now that I even am talking it out, it's anxiety of that big change that marries very well into what I want to talk about, which I think is the meat and potatoes of this episode, which is Shawn's anxiety about Cory moving on without him. We talked about this in the last episode, and I think that
Mhm.
it, again, just it's reinforced with the idea of, to him, to Shawn, people always leave. You can't rely on anyone. You can't rely on consistency. I think there's a line where he's like, no emotions, no feelings, no one gets hurt. And I was like, that is what this is about. And they bring it up and they do it so well, but it's also like, oh, you guys don't, you miss the mark, because instead of like actually talking it out, which, don't get me wrong, in a lot of episodes it's like show don't tell, but with something like this it's like, no, we need you to kind of like identify what's going on, just like you did with Eric and the anxiety. We need you to identify the fact that what Shawn's really dealing with is abandonment issues, and Cory is the one constant in his life. And he kind of relied or anticipated that Cory would always be the one constant in his life. And the mere fact, or the mere idea, that Cory may leave him is what we're dealing with. That's what we're seeing play out.
Okay, I'm so glad you felt this way, because I felt the exact same way. The first thing I wrote here is Cory is his only the only consistent person in his life. So I mean, that's something that we saw right away, is that it only makes sense for Shawn to act out in this particular circumstance. The one thing I wish that the show had actually done with this storyline, though, was kind of, instead of continue to make a joke about the codependency between Shawn and Cory, like actually like get down to the meat and potatoes of it, and understand that like sometimes you don't go to college with the people you're friends with your whole life, and sometimes you do have to make other friends. And like Shawn's reaction of, I'm never going to get close to anybody, is a bad way to react to Cory going to a college that he can't get into. But Cory looping in Lionel as some kind of throwaway friend to make Shawn jealous is just as toxic. And so there's just a lot of things that, instead of having this flashback episode, which I think was more for being cute and TGIF commercials than anything else, I wish they would have kind of talked about their codependency instead of like enforcing it.
Well, so I mean, that probably would have been healthier. Maybe I would have a better identity about what friendships should be, and it would have took me years to realize that I myself was codependent. But no, I think that, again, as someone who grew up codependent and who grew up with like one best friend, and we have to do everything together, and you moving on means that I'm being left behind, kind of thinking. It definitely would have been helpful to have them have like a serious discussion, like, make this into one of those Boy Meets World special episodes where it's like, yo, just like, we're dealing with Cory and Shawn again, but I always need you to know that I am here for you. I'm family. Even if I move across country, it doesn't mean that I'm abandoning you. And that's what this needed. Don't get me wrong, the flashback is fun. It's fun, but also it leads to a whole bunch of inconsistencies, and you know how we feel about that. But
Totally.
Ultimately, it is cool to like get some kind of origin story. It's always a fun sitcom thing to do. But I think what you and I are saying is the B storyline, or even the time with Lionel, or all this other stuff, could have addressed the issues instead of playing it for comedy.
Totally. And Shawn at the end of the episode says something to the effect of like, we'll always be friends no matter what school you go to. But that resolution feels empty because they never addressed the major issues that caused them to feel that way to begin with. And because they haven't addressed the root issue, it just feels like this is unresolved for the audience anyway.
Well, it is. We know it comes back because, again, they didn't get at the core of the issue. And because they didn't get at the core of the issue, it's just something that is like, this episode was a band-aid to a bullet wound, and eventually there will be an explosive moment where all these things come to head, because they haven't really addressed the fact that not only is Shawn kind of codependent and relies on Cory for all of his like security needs, but Cory himself is a little dismissive of the weight of that responsibility. Like, not saying that it's that he should have that responsibility, but saying that if you do have it and you play into it, you should understand what you're doing.
And yeah, it's I would say justifiable to judge Cory for not having at least a conversation with Shawn about these colleges that he was applying to. Like, no, it's not Cory's responsibility to limit his potential to Shawn's potential, which is what Shawn is asking him to do in a very unhealthy way. But Cory should understand that Shawn is expecting, due to this like childhood promise, that they go to the same school. So if that's the case, Cory should be open and be like, "Hey, I'm applying to this school. I'm applying to that school," at the very minimum. So yeah,
Well,
there's
like,
just
so what's funny about that is the moment Shawn started to invest in his own future and be like, yo, maybe you have safety schools, I'm gonna have safety friendships. I'm gonna like expand and not be so relying on one person to make me feel like I have safety or community or whatever. Like, don't get me wrong, it was reactionary, but it's still Shawn being like, okay, I need to set myself up for the future. And the moment he does that, Cory's like, whoa, 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 how dare you? And it's like, no, you guys are doing the same thing. You're hedging your bets. You're trying to do what's best for you. And at the moment, Shawn doesn't see himself as like capable of attending college, which is what you should be encouraging, being like, you can join me. Why don't you
yes.
apply? Those are things that can happen.
And kind of the problem with, again, that Boy Meets World is not recognizing is that both Shawn and Cory are willing to use people to make the other person jealous. That's something that's just never brought up as an issue. That's never something they have to confront or take ownership of. It's just left out there. And the fact that like at no point does Topanga or even Feeney suggests like, hey, you guys making other friends is probably a good thing in general. Like it might be nice not to just have one person in case you guys don't go to college. And the other thing was that you brought up that I thought I kind of agreed when I was watching the episode was that Cory should be encouraging Shawn to go to any college. Any college that Shawn can get into is like something you should encourage and support. And the focus being on them getting into the same school, I really wish Cory himself would have flipped the conversation to say, bro, let's just worry about like getting you into a school, like any school that you can get into.
Honestly, like, why not go for Stanford or whatever? It's just like,
yeah, why not?
Like you still have time. Turn it around. If you want to join me, let's do some, let's see what we can do to get you on the same page. That's one of the things. It's like, why are you limiting his dreams and his future?
Well, maybe Shawn's future is limited because he comes from a class where to dream of going to a school like Stanford is considered a fairy tale sometimes. And like, we're not even talking about the fact that Shawn is limiting his future based on the preconceived condition that he's from a trailer park so that he can't get into the same school as Cory. Like, there's a lot going on with Shawn's insecurities right now. And like, again, all of it's not being addressed. It's the most frustrating thing.
Yeah, very much. And I agree with you. That's kind of one of the things that I love and hate about this episode. It's like you get a lot of that codependency and of course Shawn and Cory being like a couple and all this other stuff. But I think that what television does very often is it doesn't get to the root of an issue. It just like presents it to you, especially in this 30-minute sitcom format. And instead, what we really need to address is codependency, insecurity, planning for your future, as you said, expanding friendships, and all of those things are like brought up. But instead, we would rather make jokes that two guys hugging is gay.
Before we get into that, I have a question for you, which is, did you consider anyone else when you were applying for colleges?
So it's funny you say that. When I applied for college, I like looking back on it, I did it completely wrong, which is that I had places that I wanted to go. I had places like on my list, but at the end of the day, and I think it was more so just because like, you're a student, you're head down and you're just, I applied, like I got into a few places, but I applied or I went with the one school that like was a guaranteed shot and I didn't even like look at anything else, because I was like, it's right there, it's easy, sure, let's just get it done. And now that I'm older, I was like, man, I should have went to like UCLA or like some other. I didn't think about college in anything other than get the degree. You know what I mean? And like I didn't think about the college experience or any of the other things that I've learned college is more about.
100%. I, like Cory, limited my college options based on my high school girlfriend, which was the dumbest thing I could have possibly ever done. But I know I'm not the only person who's made that stupid ass choice too.
Do you know how like there's like a meme that addresses that where it's like my boyfriend, it's either my boyfriend or my girlfriend, but like my partner gave up going to John Hopkins just to be with me one more year. And like as we're older, we're like, that is stupid.
It's so stupid.
That is so stupid, which is why 18-year-olds shouldn't be required to make a lifelong decision this way. Like
100%, bro. And it's frustrating because like you, like now that I'm older, I really wish that I had looked into, especially like an HBCU in like a really serious way, instead of kind of dismissing it as a non-option, because you know how black schools are non-options in the early aughts.
I mean, like, but no, that's something that should be addressed. It's not like it was just, if you were like my sister who went to an HBCU, she's constantly talking about how even as a graduate, people always told her that they like you wouldn't find success. There was nothing that could come of it. It was like going to a trade school or something like that. And of course, we completely disagree with that reasoning. And I don't think anyone should feel that way about HBCUs, especially now that we have a vice president who went to it. But we can't all just get amnesia and pretend like we weren't making it harder or telling children that going to an HBCU, especially children of color, that going to an HBCU was going to hinder them in some way.
Well, and I hate to go too off topic here, but when we were going to school in the 90s and the early aughts and whatever, the whole goal was to succeed in a white man's world. And you can't do that going to a black college. I mean, was the mindset.
That was exactly what you were told. And, you know, like, I love one of the things that now that we're older and we're looking back on things, there's a huge social media, not campaign, but like trend of like pointing out that there were all these black sitcoms that heavily promoted HBCUs. And like look at any sitcom from the 90s and they're all like Morehouse or Bethune or whatever. And I'm like, I missed that. But again, I missed that because it wasn't like, it just wasn't on the same level as Yale, which I was always told about. This is why I'm saying it's more important. It's like, you don't just need to show it. You need to show it and explain it. And that's what this kind of like bringing it back. If you want to segue back to the episode, that's exactly what I have with this episode is that, you could see it. It shows it. As I get older, I understand the context, but when you're dealing with a kid's show, especially when you're doing something like something that is supposed to be training you for the future, you kind of need to spell it out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I want to throw in here, just as a little fun trivia fact, Shawn got upset because Cory had an interview set up with Stanford, and Stanford's ultimately where Ben Savage would go to school and graduate from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's an alumni of Stanford University. So I don't know if they threw that in there because maybe there was talks on set of him wanting to go to Stanford one day, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, maybe he really did apply, and they were like, you know, like a lot of the time storylines just come from like the cast members themselves doing something. They're like, oh, that'd be really interesting. Oh, so let's talk about the gay panic in this episode.
Oh my gosh, bro. Okay, so that's kind of like my main bro moment of this whole thing is, not only are the writers leaning into a joke that they played into heavily in the season 4, episode 11, An Affair to Forget, in which Shawn is dating a girl that doesn't like Cory. So they have to have the secret relationship back and forth. And they play into it as if they're dating, quote unquote. Like that's the joke of it. It's like they're a couple. We revisit that joke again here, but it's also filled with all this gay panic brought on by Alan mostly, but later confirmed by Topanga. What the fuck is going on, TP?
Like reinforced. Like, to be fair, Topanga is the one who does it the most throughout the episode.
Yeah.
And I was like, so it's funny because it's the episode's giving dual messaging. It's giving that it's funny that these two are so close, but also it's okay that these two are so close, but also people will judge you if you're going to be this close. I mean, I think like the thing that she says the most is at the end is most telling, which is like, you're boys. And it's like, they're boys who are hugging because they came to a resolution and they care about each other and they talked it out in a semi-mature way.
Well, I mean,
are boys not supposed to do that? Like, are boys not supposed to embrace their friends with affection? Are they not supposed to build lifelong bonds? Like, what is the whole "your boys"? What does it mean?
and the kitchen scene is such a fine example of 90s parenting where you have a kid who's legitimately like heartbroken that he's going through a fight with his best friend. And instead of like trying to comfort him, his father insinuates that he may be gay by asking his mother, hey, when he and Topanga kiss, he enjoys it, right? As if that's something Amy would even fucking know.
Well,
it's just
also,
so weird.
What's also doing is that's complete by erasure. Like, I mean, you're saying that because he's interested in Topanga, there's no way there could be any sexual attraction to
Totally.
Shawn. Like this, what, 17-year-old boy whose hormones are going everywhere. You're going to say that there's, because he's kissing a girl, that's where it ends. They never have to worry again. And it's like, no, I mean, what you should be doing is, as you said earlier, as a parent, questioning, hey, can I help you with anything? Is this anything that you want to talk about? Observing and making sure that at least he is dealing with things in a semi-healthy way, or giving him the tools to navigate these feelings, even if you think he's gay. And like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna let you work this out, but here are some materials. But don't just be like, he's not gay, is he? Because his friendship with Shawn, that has been a lifelong friendship that you have completely been aware of this entire time. Now you're questioning it. And I think you're only questioning it because they're of a certain age. And again, it's like this idea that men are supposed to age out of caring about each other.
Well, I guess the also really disappointing thing about this episode is that there's been a ton of times where Boy Meets World has acknowledged homosexuality without making a joke of it. And this was the first episode where it felt like they were making a joke of it in a judgmental way. Whereas in the past, you know, they've made little hints about Frankie maybe having some gay tendencies. They've made, you know, little jokes here and there, but it was never with a judgmental attitude. And this episode's the first episode where you see that. And so the fact that we didn't even have to have this episode, because like I said, I feel like I've seen it already with An Affair to Forget, and that it was kind of filled with this little gay panic was just one of those things where I was just like, oh, I don't necessarily know that this episode even hits me in a certain way. So
I disagree. I'm not saying that we didn't need it. I'm saying that one of the things that I was thinking to myself earlier today on a interpersonal level, but also that I think is important, is when you are in any kind of relationship, be it friends or work or partners, you have the same fights over and over again. They are all like, it's like whatever you argued about the very first time, that's going to be your argument. If it's, hey, I feel abandoned and you're not acknowledging how much I feel I need you, that's going to be something that is comes up again and again and again. And it's not that you can't solve it, it's that it's going to show its face in different avenues. So the first time it was when they started dating other people, and that is a different part of sharing your friend
yeah.
with others. But now it's work and future, and like it's always going to come whenever there's an opportunity for you two to split off. um, that panic is going to come up for Shawn. That's going to be a trigger, and I think that that's one of the things that I think would have been helpful. Again, we are talking about it in 2021 understanding, so they wouldn't have never even gone back to triggers and therapy and anything
No,
like.
not at all. But the fact that the most like quote unquote woke person on the show, Topanga, is the one kind of like leaning into these, really archaic understanding of male relationships. It just seems unlike her character, even not just like unlike the times, because she seems like someone who was always like really progressive in that regard. So for her to kind of make comments in that way was strange.
Well, you know how like the moment Topanga became I'll say visually appealing in the show, they really had her lose a lot of that social justice warrior that we were getting all the time. Like, and that's not to say that she's not allowed to change her interest. It's just to say that I blame the writers and not necessarily like the character. You know what I mean? It's like I believe that
Totally.
any character would exactly what you just said be like, hey, wait a minute, let me examine this, or this is unconventional intimacy, and I think that that's great. I feel like season one Topanga would have done that, or Jebediah would have taught her. Jebediah has some kind of close friendship that he embraces and has shown her it's okay for men to care about each other. But now that we're older and we're dealing with sexuality, and it's the 90s, it's a lot of let's just keep her the hot chick.
It's really disappointing, and I think ultimately, like when I think about episodes like this, I feel like they do play into this a little bit in the future, and I feel like Friends did it a little bit with Joey and Chandler. I just feel like ultimately it's a very damaging portrayal of male friendships, because what it does is that it leans into and contributes to this idea that men can't be vulnerable or intimate with each other without it being perceived as gay, even if it's for the humor of a show. Those ideas are ultimately deemed homosexual, which is just the most ridiculous concept in the world. And so like even though like people always think about Cory and Shawn having this great friendship, they have to acknowledge these archaic boundaries in order for that friendship to be perceived as redeemable in some way, which is just disappointing.
To give it credit, it does this sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. Like this episode, it was really like, hey, they're straight, like it really wanted to reinforce that. But in fact, they actually have to bring a kiss Cory just to like prove that they're not gay. He actually still kisses women. But in later episodes, I can just think of like an episode where it's like they're in bed together, and it's just a fact. It's not stated on, it's not critiqued, it's not what are you doing here. It's just a fact. Shawn climbed into bed with Cory. They eat pancakes together, and that's just something they do together. Because the audience has understood or has the background of the level of closeness that this is, and I just wanted to say that this episode definitely failed on that point, but the series itself has shown that sometimes they're just close friends,
Exactly, which I think is why this episode kind of stands out, because it doesn't go along with what we typically have learned to expect with Boy Meets World. So it's just yeah.
You want to wrap it up?
One thing I will just say is that we had the return of the leather jackets when Shawn got cool friends. All of them were wearing leather jackets because in Boy Meets World, if you're wearing a leather jacket, you're cool. And I just think that I love that Michael Jacobs has this Fonzarelli idea of what coolness is. And I also
that reminded me, I wanted to call out there are three people who I want to call out really quickly. Who is Corey Pandos, who plays young Cory, Glenn Bob Sweet, who plays young Shawn, Rosario Gru, who played young Topanga, which again, like this casting was weird because I was like, you look nothing like any of them. Like I was like, maybe they just chose the kids who could get the diction down. Like, I don't know. But it was very weird casting. As you said, Shawn has like a leather jacket from the beginning. And like, what is this? Cory telling him that his friend says that he's in a trailer, so he shouldn't be friends with him.
Which
Like,
makes, oh my gosh, can we just talk about that real fast? That like Shawn constantly has this insecurity about his class being the thing that breaks him and Cory up, but ultimately it stems from like real life trauma that Cory probably never took ownership of.
yeah, the very first time I introduced myself to you, you said I can't be friends with you, you're poor. And it wasn't until I did something for you, like when I saved you and showed that I was
I
above,
proved my worth to you that you deemed me worth your time. Like, what the hell?
Again, that totally explains why Shawn would probably be like, oh, whenever I stop showing worth to you, you'll disregard. So
Wow.
um, so that, and then also there is Matt Kirkwood, who is titled as chubby, and we're like it's the guy who says catfight during the chubby scene, and I was like, this is not chubby. I guess this is is this chubby junior? I will accept that, but this is not chubby. We know what chubby is supposed to look like, and the idea that he would even be credited as chubby really bothers me.
It's so interesting too that like with how often we go to chubbies, they didn't just cast like a consistent person to be chubby. He's just like this never present
Sometimes
barkeep.
they do that, and it's like, what? You're right. Why couldn't you just keep one person on retainer, like a Gunther, so to speak?
Totally. The show needed a Gunther, and they missed the shot. One thing I just want to say real fast is that I thought the boys' comedic chemistry was really on point this episode, especially that scene where they finally do talk in Feeney's office. Shawn walks in and he's like, Feeney, I heard you had an academic achievement award for me. And it just made me crack up laughing. And the boys really just, every now and then, they have so much fun with their like humor, and I am consistently impressed with how the kids can go from dramatic to comedic, and that was just a moment that made me laugh.
Yeah, I mean, even the Lionel, who I don't know if we called out during our roll call. Lionel's played by Seth Miller. Even the Lionel moment where they go to Shawn's party, and they're having that breakup scene, and they're just calling it quits at this point in time, and Shawn's just like, hey, just like if you play basketball, make sure you have water. It's like it goes from like this intense anger to like really caring about him, and like you would just like, and don't you ever eat what is it, cheesecake in Paramus Mall or something like that. I don't know what it is.
All of that whole conversation felt like something I would see in like a New Girl episode. Like it felt
absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. But I also I think, I don't know for sure, but I feel like Boy Meets World is the earliest example of this that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. And every TV show since has kind of built off of it. And maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but I will say that like when I think of Scrubs and Turks and JD or Nick and Schmidt or like any of the shows, I think
Psych.
Yeah, Psych. I think all of them have like an origin, or at least they definitely like the audiences were primed for them due to Boy Meets World. And this kind of like, we are really close friends. It's not an odd couple type situation. It's we grew up together. We have this bond. You are the closest thing to a spouse I have while I'm single. And then when I get a spouse, you're the closest thing outside. Like, you know what I mean? Like, definitely.
You know what? I will say this. I feel like maybe we are giving the show too much credit, and I want our listeners to know that I do agree with CJ when I say the show invented bromance, but I think when we say that, you have to think about the modern definition of bromance. Yes, there have been two best friends in shows prior to this, but best friends who are vulnerable with each other, who can be intimate with each other, who go through both hard times and humorous times. Like even on like, I use Joey and Chandler as an example just because it's the same time period, but like they never went through like truly heavy shit. You know what I mean? Like at some point, Shawn's dad dies in the season. Like they go through heavy shit together. And so it's just not anything that I can recall that you can recall. So if you're listening to this and you can recall like a true television bromance with the highs and lows and like true like discussions about like vulnerabilities and insecurities, please let us know, because I mean, even on like the Wonder Years, which Ben's brother Fred stars in, he has a close best friend. I don't think there's any conversations as deep as the ones that Cory and Shawn has. So I do think that is unique about the show.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it treated Shawn. Shawn was the love interest of this of this series, really. And that, but love comes in many forms. And like I think that's why if I'm being honest, I think that whenever you see the crew, it's Cory, Shawn, and Topanga. And the real reason is it's Cory and Shawn's story, but we had to throw a female in there so it wasn't like just promoting homosexuality. There was no gay panic going on. Because honestly, when we look at it, it is Cory, like this entire series is built off of Cory and Shawn's relationship.
And no joke, we haven't also had any like storyline heavily involving Topanga since the Long Walk to Pittsburgh episode. The last time we had any story involving Topanga at all was that whole thing about Cory maybe making out with another girl during that college visit, but she's hardly in that episode too. Like she's a part of the show, but you're right. Like she's not the Cory and Topanga we know. Like that hasn't happened yet. Like the whole Lauren storyline that happens later in the season really establishes Topanga and gives her own like episodes and fleshes her out a lot more as a teenage adult, a young adult. But so far we haven't had anything with her, because you're right, the focus has been on these three boys constantly.
And again, I think that was kind of like the thesis of the show, especially as it started to develop, is this Cory and Shawn chemistry. What is it like when the most important person in your life is another man? And what does that look like in a healthy way and in a respectable way? And again, I think for me, like we always talk about representation, and I say that it's like important to show it and not explain several times, but one of the things that I will admit is, as a gay man, it was very great for me to see an example of two friends that could be intimate with each other and not be sexual. And I say that because I had male friends who I was really, really close with and who I cared a lot about. And I needed them to understand, and they wanted me to understand that we could be close. It's completely possible. It's not this foreign thing. It's real to have intimacy within male friendships, and it not be more than, and not have to cross any sexual bounds, if I'm making any sense.
100%. Yeah. I think that we're kind of both walking away with the same feeling, which is just that this was something that we wish they would have just handled a little bit more responsibly, because even though it's just kind of all in jest, there are kind of big statements they're making about what a heterosexual relationship can look like, that is just a little out of date. So
okay. I feel like it's time to wrap it up. We did your bra moment. Do you have a Feeny taught me?
Feeny taught me that you should have more than one friend.
That's what you're taking away from this?
my main takeaway is that, you need more than one friend. That codependency is unhealthy in any relationship, and just to depend on one person for everything can be toxic, and this is a perfect example of that.
Well, my Feeny Tommy is to address anxiety and call it by its name. I think that both with Eric and with the Cory and Shawn storyline, this was really about, hey, we need to discuss what's going on here. I mean, like, there are lots of comedic antics that we can get into to go around it, but in reality, what you really need to do is address the problem. Okay, grade. What grade are you giving this?
I'm giving this a C+.
That's exactly what I'm giving it. I love it. We're in sync with like this, the last few episodes.
It's not a good episode. Like, there's so many better episodes to look forward to, and this, in all of it, I feel like might end up being the worst of the season. Like, it's just whatever.
So it's so funny. I actually enjoyed the episode, but when I really thought about it, I was like, I also, besides the flashback scene, will forget about this episode. I like as much as I wanted to defend it, I was like, does this just ever be? Immediately, I was like, you will not remember this episode come tomorrow.
And like it would be so much more significant if the result was Shawn going, you know what, I'm going to try to get into the best school that I can, and hopefully we can like end up in the same way. But it didn't even have that resolve of like Shawn being like, I'm really going to try to go to a good college. It just had the, you know what, we're going to be friends no matter what, which is just, again, it felt like there was unresolved tension. So
you're right. And I think it's really funny because what you and I have done, I think it's also like the movie makeover pod that we've done. Very often there's like one line of dialogue that would save the episode. Just like one line, and you're like, and we would be good. But because it doesn't, it has all the pieces, but because it doesn't put them together the way that it does, or it needs to, or it doesn't include that one line that would really I guess nail the God, I don't know. Put the hammer to the nail. I don't know.
yes.
what I'm trying to say. You guys know what I mean. But anyway, that's what makes it a C+ episode.
We do have a great Feeney call in this episode. I do want to point that out. I don't know that we've had a Feeney call in a while, so it gets a little points for that, I guess. But
yeah, absolutely. That's where the plus comes from. Okay, so that being said, let's talk about homework. What do you got?
What do I got? Okay, so I randomly saw this movie on Netflix that legit blew my mind. I don't know if I had too many edibles before I saw it. I don't know what the situation was, but this movie was like, what the fuck did I just watch? And me and my fiance had a good like 2-hour conversation about this movie. It's called What Happened to Monday. It's on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen this.
I've seen it.
Bro, this movie, just for the audience that's listening, you can find it on Netflix. It's about, here's the IMDb summary of it. In a world where families are limited to one child due to overpopulation, a set of identical septuplets, there's 7 of them.
Septuplets or something like that.
Septuplets must avoid being put in a long sleep by the government and dangerous infighting while investigating the disappearance of one of their own. It's a crazy ass movie, and if you have time, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Just because it raises, I love when sci-fi tackles ethical questions and the whole idea of overpopulation. Even in China, we saw this one child rule arise. Tackling that was in a sci-fi way was really interesting to me, so I highly recommend it.
I've seen that movie. I will tell you, I called it immediately. Like I called the ending out immediately. But
totally,
how we got there, I will say was totally worth the journey, and I did enjoy myself. So yeah, even if you solve the ending immediately, still watch it because it's worth the ride. Okay, for me, I feel conflicted because I wish I was sharing this on a better episode, but for my homework this week, I'm gonna go with WandaVision.
okay.
I don't know if have you seen it?
I have not, no.
Oh my God. It's good. If you're a huge fan of television, you should really like this series. It's Marvel's first Disney Plus series. And it's great. I think the acting nails what they're going for. I love a good mystery. I know for some people they're like, what's going on? It's like, if you like, you can get what's going on. And if you can't, just go for the ride. I mean,
here's a question. I am not someone who's completely caught up on the Marvel movies. I actually don't even know who Wanda is or who the 2 main characters are, really. Is that going to be an issue?
Yes and no. It's one of those things to where, to be honest, it should not hinder you from watching it and enjoying it right off the bat. Even if you don't know who the main character is, just go into it. I think what hinders people is that they know that there's more to it. So it's like, it feels like you're picking up the 4th book in a series, but only because there are other books. It works just as well if you were to watch it right off the bat, because
it's a standalone.
It's a standalone story, and you can figure you can go along with the mystery. Yeah, but that is my homework. I feel like it's totally worth checking out. I think that you'll enjoy it. And again, I think anyone who's a fan of especially like TV land or like classic sitcoms, you'll get what they were going for, and you'll have a good time. Okay, so thank you guys for listening to Bro Meets World. Remember, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all of the places. Reach out to us at Bro Meets World or email us at bromeetsworld@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at I am not your Oreo and TC.
Find me on Instagram at A Brave For Me. You can also find the both of us reviewing movies on our podcast Movie Makeover, where we'll have a bunch of episodes coming out throughout the next few weeks. So definitely check that out.
All right, remember to dream,
Try.
and do good. Later, bros.
Later, bro.
When this boy meets world.